Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that the US stock market will collapse on August 18th. It'll be a black swan event, as in like Black Monday in 1987, Black Thursday in 1929. It'll be a crash in the stock market, and it is also predicted that it'll likely be 13% in one or more of the three main US stock indexes. And this video is also predicting that US warships will be sunk on December 10th, and that Israel will nuke Iran on January 3rd next year. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email, as we can see here. And here. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Regarding this prediction for the stock market, it needs to be pointed out that this prediction is extremely precise. We are talking about a specific date for a crash, but also specifically 13%. Probably. To predict this ahead of time, and currently the market is going up, there is no hint at a crash at this time. It's not as if the market is already crashing at the time of this recording, which is August 4th. Again, the email, though, was composed on August 2nd. And so for the skeptic, it needs to be explained that this precision cannot come about through any other means other than a supernatural source. Of course, there are people that think that there will be a crash in the stock market. There have always been those. There's always been that. That's part of the markets. The markets go up and down based on a war between bulls and bears, pessimists and optimists, etc. So naturally, it's not out of the realm of possibility that there will be a crash at some point soon, even. That's possible. But what I'm saying specifically is a specific date and a specific amount, 13%. It'll be the second biggest loss in the stock market in one day in terms of percent in history. That's what's being predicted here. This prediction will prove, in other words, that it is from God. And that brings me to the next thing that needs to be clarified. What do we mean when we say God? Does it matter what we mean when we say God, or I say God? It's a word in the vocabulary, but it means something different for different people. And for many people today, it doesn't really matter. But from this perspective of the origin of this prediction, it matters greatly. Because this prediction will prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible, the God of Israel. And this particular God is a jealous God. The thing that this God hates the most, according to the Bible, is false religious worship. It matters. It matters to this God. Why? Because this God is a personal being. And it is not a quote unquote God that is an impersonal energy, that is the universe itself, that is a so-called collective consciousness, etc. The Eastern or Indian religion that has mutated into what might be called today in the West New Age or New Spirituality, or not even anything, because the majority of people that have this worldview don't really know what they're even talking about because they don't think about these things. But for those that do think about these things and read books on the subjects, etc., they will use language like collective consciousness or the universe. But that is quite the opposite to the God of the Bible, which isn't an impersonal energy that is the universe itself. The opposite of that is that God is a personal being and is not the universe itself. He is the creator of the creation. He isn't the creation itself. He is the creator of the creation. The word holy is a Hebrew word that means separate from. He is separate from the creation. He isn't the creation itself. The technical terms for these two different contradictory worldviews is pantheism and monotheism. And hopefully at this point you can see that they cannot both be true. Either the world is round or it is flat. But it cannot be both. And it is not subjective. Because someone has the opinion that the world is flat does not make it flat and round because someone else has the opinion that it's round. It is one or the other. It is the same with the nature of God. God cannot be pantheistic and monotheistic. And for many people that are subscribing to a pantheistic form of religion, because, well, the New Age is essentially create your own religion. The Western mind has not been formed for this, and so they have a lot of cognitive dissonance. They'll incorporate into their worldview some ideas about a monotheistic God, for example, a God that can be prayed to, but at the same time, they'll assert that God is the universe itself and is an impersonal energy. They're confused, in other words. But to be clear is to recognize that this is confusion. Both cannot be true. One or the other is true, or neither of them are true, and some other worldview is true. Other worldviews include atheism. And to go in a little deeper, within monotheism, we have contradictory worldviews that cannot all be true. In other words, the Hindu belief or the New Age belief that all religions are authentic expressions of the so-called truth, etc., and all lead up different paths up the same mountain, etc., that in itself is a worldview. And as such, it is subject to comparison as to whether or not it is true. And it is one of the series of worldviews that are either true or not true. Just because one says that, it sounds enlightened, it sounds democratic. That's why it's appealing for the Western mind. It sounds multicultural and therefore good, quote unquote. But that doesn't make it anything more than a worldview. And it is either true or false. Just because it sounds nice and enlightened doesn't make it true. Politically correct, whatever. The truth is, the Christian worldview is exclusive. It's extremely exclusive, and of course, this is one of the main reasons why Westerners today reject it, because of their liberal, pluralistic, multicultural ideology. When faced with other competing worldviews, it is politically incorrect to claim that one of them is true, and therefore they gravitate naturally to the Hindu worldview that says all of the worldviews are authentic expressions of the truth, but that in itself is a worldview. It is the Indian worldview, and it is not true. All of the worldviews, religions, fundamentally conflict with each other, and therefore they are not all true. They fundamentally conflict, including the monotheistic worldviews, including Islam. Either Christianity is true or Islam is true, or neither of them are true, but they both cannot be true. If one understands Islam correctly, it is clear that it is obsessed with how Jesus is just a prophet. That is the religion in a nutshell. It's clear from the Christian perspective that Islam is from Satan, and it is designed specifically to counter Christianity because it is obsessed with how Jesus is just a prophet and how God cannot have a son. That is the Islamic religion in a nutshell. Now, I could go on about apologetics, but I'll stop right there. I really could go on. And it would be interesting, I think. But what I want to say is that this prediction will end this debate. There's no debate after this prediction comes to pass. The proof for the righteous Christian God of the Bible worldview will be proven when this prediction comes to pass. And I know far, far, far more than you or anyone how this prediction is known ahead of time. And if you are a collective consciousness yoga practitioner or something to that effect, you are incorrect to conclude that I must have somehow tapped into the so-called collective consciousness, and that's how I knew this prediction ahead of time. You are a fool if that is your conclusion. Likewise, if you are an Islamist and you want to conclude that I was informed by demons, or a quote-unquote Christian with that same conclusion, you are also a fool. And if you are a Christian, be warned. As Jesus said, the unforgivable sin is the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. What I will do in this video, though, is explain the reasons for how this prediction is known ahead of time. And as you will clearly see, these reasons could not have been concocted in the imagination of a human being. No one is that creative. But furthermore, this prediction is precise. But you'll see that even the reasons for how this is known are clearly supernatural. To conclude otherwise makes you, I don't even know what the word. I mean, hardcore fundamentalist, agnostic, atheist, religionist is not even appropriate. You're just a fool. I mean, 100%. As you will see. So let's get into these reasons for how this prediction or these predictions are known ahead of time. Spain is an anagram for Psalm. This is amazing. This was an amazing discovery or insight. The I resembles an L and the N resembles an M. And what I mean also by amazing, it is like the key. It unlocked so much. Spain is an anagram for Psalm, which is a book in the Bible. I resembles L and N resembles M. And so when we change these letters, because of the resemblances to the adjacent letter, we then have an anagram, an exact anagram for Spain, for Psalm, I should say. And Spain's second World Cup win against Argentina, in which the goal was scored by player number 7, pointed to Psalm 2:7. Again, the second win and the only goal, the goal that won the game by player number 7, hinted at Psalm 2:7. Psalm chapter 2, verse 7, which is, I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Now, I'll start with, it's confusing how Jews who claim the Bible doesn't support that Jesus is the Son of God or that God has a son. It's clearly stated right there in the Old Testament, in the book of Psalms. And this isn't by far the only example. So that's another subject, the blindness of the Jews, as the Apostle Paul put it. But it's clearly blindness. Clearly, it's literally blindness. Well, not literally, but. So, today I have begotten you. God is speaking, and he says he has a son, and today he has begotten him. Spain begat Argentina. These two teams played in the World Cup final. Spain begat Argentina. The MV Hondius ship, the Hantavirus ship, the MV Hondius ship departed Ushuaia, Argentina. If you follow that story, the big story is the story itself was the travel of the ship and the timeline of the ship's journey up the Atlantic. Okay, but it started at the very bottom tip of Argentina, a place called Ushuaia, which is also known as End of the World. That's the nickname of this place. It's the end of the world. As in World Cup final. It departed on the date 4/1, April 1st, the beginning of the 4th month, which was the same day as 4 Artemis astronauts, and Artemis sounds like Argentina, departed for a ring around the dark side of the moon on the exact day of the full moon, by the way. And McCartney performed at the 4-story ring campus of Apple. Apple was celebrating its, I think, 50th birthday. And the coincidence is that McCartney founded Apple Corporation, or Apple Inc. And the two companies, Apple Inc. and Apple Corporation, battled it out for a while over the rights of the name Apple. And McCartney, at the end of all of the history, celebrated their anniversary. The moon symbolizes Messiah. One thing, actually, it was the 50th anniversary, and 50 is 25 times 2. 25 times 2 hints at 252 and 2,520, which is the prophetic number of days in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the period of the end times, as in the end of the world ship that departed on the same day as the astronauts departed. And God uses records for signs, and these astronauts achieved a record furthest distance from Earth, which was 252,000 miles. as in 2520, as in 25 times 2 anniversary. Now, the moon symbolizes Messiah in the Bible because the moon is a giant rock, and rock is symbolism for Jesus. Also, the sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And watching for the timing of the moon in the Bible is important, as it is symbolic of watching for the timing of the Lord's return, including watching for moon signs. But the moon symbolizes Messiah, the apple of God's eye, an expression in the Bible. And Messiah is what the name Messi, the star player for Argentina, hints at. And again, the ship departed Argentina. The MV Hondius is named after a famous 4th century master map engraver during the Age of Discovery, who helped make Amsterdam a world center for map making. The 4 Artemis astronauts were reliving the Age of Discovery of the moon. The MV Hondius ship departed Argentina and reached the Canary Islands of Spain on the date 5/10, May 10th, which was exactly 40 plus 40 years, as in 4 times 4th century, and 4 Artemis astronauts, 4-story ring campus of Apple. Okay, the ship arrived in Spain, the Canary Islands, exactly 40 plus 40 years after the Boston Red Sox win streak ended in 46. Okay, again, 40 plus 40 years since at 4 astronauts, 4-story ring campus. The second win for Spain, as in Psalm, in the 23rd World Cup, pointed to 2 times 23 equals 46, which hints at Psalm 46. And the verse 6 of that psalm is, "The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts." Messi, which hints also at anti-Messiah, whose number in Bible prophecy is 666, played a record-setting 6th World Cup of Nations. There were 6 confirmed hantavirus cases when the ship arrived in Spain. That's 666. And confirms pointing to verse 6 of Psalm 46. The World Cup, again, was the second win for Spain, and it was the 23rd World Cup. It was also Lionel Messi's second World Cup final in a row in the 23rd World Cup. 2 times 23 is 46, and Spain hints at Psalm, so Psalm 46. But it was Lionel Messi's record-setting, and God uses records, 6th World Cup of Nations that he's played in. And when the ship arrived in Spain, there were 6 confirmed cases of hantavirus, which confirms that we are looking at Psalm 46, verse 6, which is the nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The nations rage, and we are talking about the World Cup of Nations. Why will the nations rage? Well, I'm jumping ahead. The nations will rage after Israel will nuke Iran. But I'm not going to jump ahead anymore. But also, the prediction for the stock market isn't only for the U.S. stock market, which, by the way, is in New York, right where the World Cup final was played. But the world's stock markets are also going to crash on the state, as in the World Cup and the nations rage. On 5/10, May 10th, when the ship arrived in Spain after leaving Argentina, again, those are the 2 nations in the final of the Cup, on May 10th, 7 times 7 plus 7 plus 7, or 7 times 7 plus 7 times 7 plus 7 times 7 people. Why is that? Why is that? Okay, well, 3 sets of 7. God's number is 7. It's also his signature number. Speaking of ships traveling around the world, there are 7 continents. For example, there are 7 objects in the night sky that move, that are visible to the naked eye. There are 7 colors of the rainbow. There are 7 notes in a musical scale. There are 7 levels to the periodic table of elements. There are 7 metals on which antiquity is based, and on and on. It's his signature number in the creation. The 7 seas. So anyway, 3 sets of 7, though, is judgment in the Bible. The Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment. So anyway, there were 7 times 7 plus 7 times 7 plus 7 times 7 people on the ship when it arrived in Spain from the end of the world, Argentina. 7 plus 7 Spanish passengers were flown to Madrid, Spain, after it arrived. 510, with the 7's passengers, was 70 days before player number 7 scored the winning goal, the only goal for Spain against Argentina in the World Cup final, as in the end of the world. World Cup final, end of the world, Argentina. And the goal by number 7 was assisted by player number seventh prime number, 17. So the goal was scored by number 7, and the assist was from number 7th prime number. And again, it was 7 plus 7 passengers that were evacuated to the capital of Spain from the Canary Islands. The ship arrived from the end of the world on May 10th. Exactly 7 months before it is predicted that U.S. warships will be sunk, which will expedite the end times and the end of the world. The nation's rage. So 70 days and then this 7 months also from the 777's passengers. And to player number 7 and the assist by the 7th prime number. All confirmation for adding 7 months exactly to get December 10th, a date that was already known prior to discovering this connection for the sinking of U.S. warships. And we are talking about a ship. This is the Hantavirus ship at sea. And we are talking about this exact 7 months connection to the predicted sinking of U.S. warships at sea. The nation's rage. Also, the number 70 in the Bible symbolizes nations. We have the 70 days to the World Cup final, the end of the World Cup of Nations final. 70 days in the Bible. 70 symbolizes nations in the Bible, and it is 70 days from the 777's passengers to the World Cup final, World Cup of Nations final, and 70 symbolizes nations. You see what I meant earlier when I said that clearly these reasons for knowing these predictions are from God. The only way one could not reach the same conclusion is if they are, let me put it this way, it's because they don't want to. And that's a spiritual thing. Because the purpose of this life is to make a decision as to whether or not one wants to be with God forever, And most people don't. They would rather go their own way. They'd rather do their own thing. And those people are not rational. It's not a rational decision. And that bleeds over into dismissing something like this. I mean, if you actually think that these are coincidences, especially when the predictions come to pass, I mean, there's nothing I can do. You have a spiritual thing going on with your Creator, but at least now you know. I mean, now you know. I mean, no, you won't, because you'll even block that out. You'll just forget that you watched this video is what you'll do. Okay. So the Dutch word hond translates to dog. Jodocus Hondius used a watchdog as his publishing symbol with the Latin phrase cane vigilante, meaning the watchful dog. Again, the ship's named after the map maker. He used this watchdog as a symbol and used the Latin phrase, which means the watchful dog. The name Canary Islands, which is where this Hondius ship that means dog arrived in the Canary Islands. And the Canary Islands name comes from the Latin phrase Canariae Insulae, which means islands of the dogs. Messiah commanded his disciples to be watchful and to watch for the signs of the end of the world and his return. If you ask the average Christian, quote unquote, today, if they could name one prophetic sign, they wouldn't even understand the question. Despite Jesus commanding multiple times to watch for the signs of his return. And they would even miss the obvious one because they just don't get it. They don't understand the question. They don't what? Prophetic signs? What is that even? I mean, Christianity is a prophetic tradition. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, Revelation 19:10. But these quote-unquote Christians don't even know what their faith is, which is the tradition of prophecy. The disciples recognized that Jesus was the Messiah through his fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. For example, 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy for the purpose of God proving it. But the vast majority of Christians aren't interested in prophecy. How can that be? It sounds like a contradiction. It is. How can you be interested in Christianity without being interested in prophecy? The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And so anyway, that's what's going on in this video. We are watching for the signs of his return as Jesus commanded, and he is about to return. And so that's why on a daily basis, it is just difficult just to keep up and document the predictions, let alone, or rather record them, let alone document them into a video or something for other people to know. It's extremely challenging, I have to say. It takes up the entire day, every day. Because the truth is, the vast majority of God's prophetic signs are not recognized by anyone else, other than myself and a friend that I collaborate with and the few others that I send emails to. And I don't know what to say about that. I don't want that. I never asked for this ministry, which may be why I was given it, because I didn't seek it. But here we are, and the vast majority of God's signs are not being recognized by other quote-unquote watchers. Why is that? Well, one main reason is that the other quote-unquote watchers are not watching, although they think they are, and they call themselves watchers. A large percentage of them are attempting to decipher some sort of supposed secret code in the Bible, combined with the Great American Eclipse to discover the rapture date. And they're only rapture date focused. They have no idea that God is communicating so many other things other than the rapture date. They don't even have a clue that what's going on. All they're thinking about is watching for the rapture date. Why is that? Well, I could theorize that it's probably because it's a little bit selfish. They're focused on themselves in a way and getting out of here. Whereas that was never my approach to the prophetic signs. I wanted to use the signs that I was learning about to warn other people. And I was handing out flyers like a madman in the early days, for years actually, and spending my savings on this endeavor, desperately trying to use at that time, because I didn't know either in the very beginning that God was pointing to anything other than the rapture date, but I was hoping to at least use the rapture date to prove to people that were left behind, etc., right? Whereas I didn't know anyone else that was doing such a thing. They were just looking at this with curiosity and, well, maybe they were telling themselves that they were doing some good by encouraging other believers if they had an outlet. But that's not the way I saw it. This was meant for the world, not the choir. And learning about the rapture date, how does that help others? Besides so-called encouraging other believers, which isn't trivial, but nonetheless, there's more to this. There's way more than just that with God's prophetic signs. God's prophetic signs, in other words, are not only or even primarily for encouraging the quote-unquote faithful that he's coming soon. I mean, that's not necessary, really. I mean, it's good to know when the rapture date is, but the reason why I want to know when the rapture date is so that I know how much time I have left to warn other people. Not so I could feel good about when I get out of here. In fact, the more time, the better. And I've always felt that way. It's like, man, I wish there was more time, not less. But whereas the other quote unquote watchers are like, can't wait to get out of here. No, that's not the way I approach it anyway. No, I can wait to get out of here. I can wait. You know, some people I can appreciate if they're in chronic pain or something that they can't wait to get out of here. But no, I can wait because the more time there is, the more opportunity there is to warn other people. And so what I'm saying is that I think this is why I ended up in this position, which I didn't ask for, and I don't consider it to be like a great thing, by the way. Like, what I mean is like, I could leave it. Like, this is extremely exhausting what I've been doing for the last 8 years, right? Like, exhausting isn't even the right word. Like, I am very tired is not the right word. Okay. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that I'm trying to explain why God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. And one thing that's not appreciated is, because they're not really watching, is that none of the prophetic signs, which they, to be fair, are aware of some of them, but not the vast majority of them, like thousands and thousands of signs that are not known. But it's because the full intended meaning of any of the signs cannot be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. It's the same with the Bible. What makes the Bible supernatural is its connections. This is what a Christian comes to appreciate after learning about the Bible. is that it's not a linear document. One can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible. It is all interconnected, although the books were written hundreds of years apart, etc. It's all one book. Unlike, for example, the Quran, which is a mishmash of supposed sayings that Muhammad said that contradict each other, and it's not coherent at all. It's not at all like the Bible. Not at all like the Bible. It's completely different. It's just a bunch of sayings and stuff like that, and rules. And, whereas the Bible is a history book, it's a complete story. Anyway, it's all interconnected, and likewise, so is God's prophetic signs. And what's another problem in evangelical culture is that also isn't appreciated about the Bible, is that it is interconnected, because they love to isolate passages in order to prove their heretical doctrine, which is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are product of this doctrine. But this doctrine is based on the principle of isolating passages, just like they isolate prophetic signs without connecting them and understanding their context, which takes time and analysis to understand what's going on. And slowly over the years, God has taught how his big picture of signs works, and different things that build on prior discoveries and insights and meanings to be able to, at this point, immediately, quickly recognize what's going on when God puts forth a prophetic sign. Because they're coming daily now, whereas in the beginning, you'd have maybe a handful, maybe a month. But now it's like rapid fire, like a fire hose. And one needs to be able to quickly understand in order to know what's going on, which the others wouldn't be able to understand at this point. They don't have the background even. The years of studying it and thinking about it from morning until night for full-time hours for 8 years. And again, it has nothing to do with me. I'm not boasting here. I'm just explaining how and why, what's going on. Okay, so I guess I went off on a tangent here because of this paragraph here about the watchful dog. The Dutch ship is named after this dog. It's a watchful dog. In other words, it's a prophetic sign. The Hantavirus ship is a prophetic sign, and it is speaking directly to the watchers about its meaning. Now, of course, I'm sure there are other quote-unquote watchers that have at least recognized that the ship is a prophetic sign. But like I'm saying, it requires the background and the connections and its context with other signs to be able to really appreciate what's really going on. Like I'm explaining in this video, just for example, right at this moment, how it is a parallel with the World Cup. The two are really the same sign. The World Cup and the Hantavirus ship are essentially, well, it's all interconnected, like I'm saying, just like the Bible. It's all the same. It's all the same. Okay. Spain won its second World Cup in the 23rd World Cup. Argentina placed second and played in its second World Cup final in a row in the 23rd World Cup. Spain equals Psalm. 2 times 23 equals 46. Psalm 46. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way. Now that's a hint at the twin earthquakes that occurred during the World Cup that were 39 seconds apart on the Argentinian player's 39th birthday. Messi. Though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, as in the prophecy for the sunken, or prediction for the sunken U.S. warships, though the mountains tremble at its swelling, the nations rage, as in the World Cup of Nations, the kingdoms totter, he utters his voice, the earth melts. Going into the tournament, Messi of Argentina had 911 career goals. In the World Cup, he has worn these two jerseys, and only these two, numbers 10 and 19, which hints at 9/11, two ones and a 9. The viral news story at the time of the final was how Messi had been photographed at the age of 19 bathing an infant who is now the star player for Spain and is now 19 years old. In the final game, Messi wore number 10, and this Spanish player, who is now 19 years old, wore number 19. By the way, that's a huge coincidence because the reason that happened with the baby photo was a photographer was making a calendar of the members, the team players for the team Barcelona, and Messi was January, and the photographer's idea for the photo was to have him be bathing a son, and so they had a draw, and the mother of the star player won the draw, brought the infant in, and that's how that coincidence happened. 19 years later, they're playing each other, and they're the two star players for each other's teams. So, anyway, also in the World Cup final, Messi wore number 10, and the 19-year-old wore number 19, which is another 9/11. The 19th tarot card depicts a naked infant boy, and in alternate or older tarot cards, the infant boy is sitting on a lion, which is hinted at with 19-year-old Lionel bathing the infant boy sitting in a baby bathtub. As in the 19th tarot card, the infant boy, naked infant boy, sitting on a lion. The 19th tarot card is the sun. And the sun in the images of the card closely resembles the sun on the Argentinian flag. It's uncanny. The sun is a play on words, and God's son, S-O-N, capital S-O-N. The sun, capital S-U-N, is a play on God's capital S-O-N, which is mentioned 2 times in Psalm chapter 2. Messi played in the final in 2 World Cups in a row. And the other guy won with Spain for Spain's second World Cup final win. Psalm chapter 2, in which capital S-O-N is mentioned 2 times. That's why this viral news story about this coincidence of Messi bathing the infant boy, which was symbolic of Messi and his own son. As I will explain, there's more to it. The photo of Messi bathing the infant hints at Messi's own son, who was born on the date 9/11. And this is a typo, or rather, it's incorrect. It wasn't in the year 12. It was in the year 15. The ringleader of the hijackers on Flight 11 was the only Egyptian 9/11 hijacker. The only one that was Egyptian. And he made his and he was the ringleader, and he made his final preparations for the attack on the World Trade Center, which is where near the final World Cup game was played. He made his final preparations for the attack for 9/11 while he was in Spain. Spain defeated Messi in the World Cup final. Messi was born 80 days before the date 9/11. And while wearing number 10, Messi scored his record-setting 19th World Cup goal in the 80th minute of the game. This is because 80 years prior to this World Cup was the year 46. Messi's son was born on the date 9/11, and the anti-Messiah, the 44th president, read Psalm 46 at the 9/11 memorial on the 4+6th anniversary. Again, this World Cup was pointing to Psalm 46 because it, again, second World Cup win for Spain in the 23rd World Cup, 2 times 23, 46. Spain is an anagram for Psalm. Okay, now I'm saying, though, that this 80th minute of the game and Lionel Messi's 80 days before his birth 80 days before the date 9/11, hints at the 80 years prior, which is the year 46. Messi scored 4+4 goals in the 4+4 games he played in this World Cup tournament. That was 40+40 years after 46. Messi played in 2 World Cup finals in a row. The 46 World Cup was the second World Cup in a row to be canceled due to World War II. More confirmation that God is pointing to Psalm chapter 2, which speaks of his son, which is why we have also Lionel Messi's son being born on the date 9/11. "19-year-old Messi of Argentina bathing the now 19-year-old Yamal, who wore number 19 for Spain. The 19th tarot card that depicts this, and Messi's record-setting 19th World Cup goal is the reason why the Hantavirus ship departed the end of the world port in Argentina 109 days, which hints at 19, before the World Cup final on the 19th of the month between Argentina and Spain. And again, the ship came from Argentina and went to Spain, Canary Islands. It departed the end of the world, and it's the 109 days, and we've got all these 19s. What I didn't write in this paragraph is that God is pointing to COVID-19. That's why it's the Hantavirus ship. It's the coronavirus. And that's why the sun in the flag, by the way, and on the tarot card, it's the corona. Coronavirus is what God is. Coronavirus 19 in the World Cup. God's still pointing to it. It's not history. What's going to happen is because of the vaccinations, there has been unnatural pressure being put on the COVID virus, and it hasn't gone away like other viruses would have by now because of the hybrid of natural immunity and these vaccines that all occurred at different times. You don't mass vaccinate in a pandemic. It just ends up making it far worse. You're putting all kinds of pressure. And furthermore, the vaccines didn't work. All they did was put pressure on the of the virus to mutate. And what's going to eventually happen is that this virus will mutate into something completely different in a way that will devastate the immune systems of the peoples whose immune systems have been devastated through their vaccines and inability to naturally get immunity to the virus. And there's going to be a true epidemic, a true mass death outcome with this COVID-19. In other words, what's happened already, which was largely a lie, is now going to really happen. But for those who have been quote unquote vaccinated. That's what's happening. Okay, now I'm just going to continue this paragraph here. 109 is 9 plus 10 plus 10th prime number. And this is why Messi wore number 10 and Messi wore number 19, which hints at 9/11, and why Messi entered the tournament with 911 goals, and why in the halftime show Madonna emerged from the tunnel while wearing number 9, followed by Ronaldo and Ronaldinho wearing number 10 and number 10, another 9/11. But this is all confirmation of the 109 days. And 109 is the 9 plus 10 plus 10th prime number. So the 9/11 signs confirm this connection also, because not only does 109 hint at 19 and COVID-19, but it also hints at 9/11, because it is the 9 plus 10 plus 10th prime number. Yeah, that revelation, that understanding regarding the reason for the 19's pattern here and the connection to the Hantavirus ship was recognized after this email was composed. So I've just added in something that's profound that isn't in this email, which is the biggest point of all, you might argue, which is that God has communicated what is still coming for those that are Christians and into this and are expecting something, another pandemic, but a new virus. It won't be. What's coming is COVID-19, but with a vengeance. And by the way, oh, okay. I was about to say by the way, but actually it's something really important. The ship was a Dutch ship. The ship, after the passengers disembarked in Spain and were evacuated to their various nations, which, by the way, was 23 nations. And that's another parallel with the 23rd World Cup of Nations. I think I'm just jumping ahead. I think that's later in this email. Anyway, that ship, after it had done its business, went back to the Netherlands. It was a Dutch ship. What I have just talked about how what's coming is a mutated COVID virus that's been forced to adapt because of the vaccination program that was evil. And because it was evil, it's not surprising that there would be this evil outcome about this far worse COVID virus that's coming. That guy, he's Dutch. That's right. Geert Vandenbosch. You need to look him up. Geert Vandenbosch, God has chosen, and now I'm proving it. I always wanted to prove it through God's signs that what Geert Vandenbosch was saying was true. Because if Geert Vandenbosch is the one guy in the world that's knowing what's going to happen, you would think that God would point to him. He just did. It's amazing. I've been wanting to figure that out. The ship is Dutch. It went back to the Netherlands. Geert Vandenbosch speaks Dutch. He's actually from Belgium, but Belgium is made up of Dutch people and French people and Flemish people, right? It's a multilingual nation. He's one of the Dutch people in Belgium, so he's Dutch. This is amazing. Now, from the end of the world, Argentina, the Hantavirus ship reached Spain on May 10th with 7 times 7 plus 7 plus 7, or 7 times 7 plus 7 times 7 plus 7 times 7 people, 70 days before player number 7 for Spain scored the winning goal that was assisted by player 7th prime number against Argentina in the World Cup. Right? Ship from Argentina to Spain, and then 70 days to the Argentina-Spain game in which number 7 scored the winning goal. And again, the World Cup pointed to Psalm chapter 46, as I've explained. Now, this final that pointed to Psalm 46 is 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6 days. And God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning in general in his signs. Okay, so it's a 3 repetition here of 4 plus 6, which is at Psalm 46. So 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6 days after the final that pointed to Psalm 46 is the predicted date that the stock markets of the world will collapse on August 18th. Okay, so as I'm saying, as I said at the beginning, this is obviously from God. If you think that this is just neat, how I've come up with this in my own mind, I don't know what to tell you, especially when the prediction comes to pass. As well, 5/10, May 10th is exactly 7 months before it is predicted that U.S. warships will be sunk. Revelation chapter 7 describes 144,000 of God's people. After departing the end of the world, Argentina, the Hantavirus ship reached Spain on May 10th, which is 144,000 minutes, the equivalent of 100 days, before it is predicted that the world's stock markets will collapse. So we've got 2 connections to the collapse of the world's stock markets here. And both are being pointed to with the ship that departed end of the world. Okay, one, because the World Cup final was pointed to by the ship, as I've explained. And that day is 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6 days to the collapse of the world's stock markets. And the day that the ship arrived in Spain, again, the World Cup was between Argentina and Spain, that day is 144,000 minutes. And that's relevant because of Revelation chapter 7 and this pattern of sevens here, including the 70 days and 7 months connections. So, in Genesis chapter 7, the flood judgment began on the date 2/17, before Noah's ship departed. The Hantavirus ship departed end of the world on April 1st, the 2 times 17th prime number of days before the predicted crash in the world's stock markets on August 18th. Okay, so we have a connection from the day it departed end of the world, the day it arrived from Spain, and the World Cup final to the predicted collapse of the world stock markets, as in World Cup of Nations. And again, the World Cup final was played right near Wall Street in New York, where the stock exchange is. Now, Revelation 8:9 states that, quote, a third of the ships were destroyed, unquote. The ships in this prophecy symbolize America. Okay, I've explained this many, many times, but I guess I'll just explain it again. There are those that say or believe that America is not in Bible prophecy. They couldn't be more wrong. As we would expect, America is very prominent in Bible prophecy, including Old Testament prophecy, because ancient Tyre is symbolism for America. Ancient Tyre was a successful, strong nation-state, city-state that was protected naturally by ocean. That is God's Gentile nation, America, that he designed to be protected by, surrounded by oceans. All right, that was ancient Tyre. It wasn't until Alexander the Great built a causeway from the mainland that Tyre was finally defeated. Now, in the prophecy of Isaiah chapter 23, we have this judgment on Tyre in context of also judgment on Tarshish, which is described as the ships of Tarshish. We have all kinds of evidence, secular evidence, historic archaeology evidence, etc., to conclude that Tarshish was in fact Great Britain. But Great Britain, like America, was set apart from the rest of Europe and was protected by oceans and became the empire on which the sun never set because of its ships, its navy and merchant ships, as in the ships of Tarshish. It is said in this prophecy that Tarshish and the ships of Tarshish had a daughter. What other nation do you know of that had a daughter? God set apart the UK with its unique culture of individualism and Protestant Christianity and a rich language, the richest language, to begin this project of spreading the gospel around the world, largely done through its English-speaking nations, especially America. And so America, of course, is the daughter of Tarshish. So we have Isaiah chapter 23. Like many prophecies in the book of Revelation, they are parallel with Old Testament prophecy. The description of the destruction of ships in Revelation chapter 8 is, in fact, symbolic of the destruction of America. Revelation 8 and Isaiah 23 is why the Washington, D.C. earthquake in the nation's capital that was felt by 1/3 of the U.S. population occurred on the date 8/23, shortly after the Antichrist's 50th birthday, no less. Again, 50 is 25 times 2. I said that earlier, so I might as well say it again. But 50 years is, of course, extremely prophetic in the Bible, too. Now, there are many, many, many other proofs that I could give you for how 8 and 23 and the third of the ships being destroyed in Revelation chapter 8 is symbolic of the destruction of America. But I don't need to give you any more proof. I don't need to give you any proof at all, because I know far more than you the reason and purpose for this prediction, or these predictions from God, and it is to prove the controversial things that I am saying in these videos. There is no debate regarding these things. I hope I'm clear. There's zero discussion once these predictions come to pass. That is the purpose of this prediction. And again, I know more than you the purpose of this prediction and why God has given me a voice through this prediction. It is to prove the controversial things that I am saying, including the other controversial things that I've already said, including the truth about COVID-19 and the identities of the Antichrist. It's 2 of them. I've only talked about 1 of them. I think. Yes, I have. There's no discussion. So if you are, for example, an evangelical that loves to play the Antichrist guessing game, it's time to stop. That's the point. To not appreciate that is to miss entirely the point of this video, of this prediction that is from God. You might as well turn off this video now. You are wasting your time, because the purpose of this prediction is not for you to go, oh, cool, neat. That's really neat. You were able to know that such and such was going to happen ahead of time. No, that's not the purpose of the prediction. The prediction's purpose is to prove the controversial things that I am saying and to end these debates once and for all, because we're out of time. You are incorrect with your theology about the ability to know the identity of the Antichrist. And you are incorrect on other things, including the doctrine of imminence. Both of these doctrines are from Satan. And that's, I realize, also controversial, But that's also proven with these predictions. Your doctrine is from Satan. That's a fact. It's deception. And it'll be proven when these predictions come to pass. And that's the purpose or the point of the predictions. I'll say one more thing. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, overwhelmingly proves these things. Of course, it's so vast, it would take years to explain it all. His big picture of signs, I mean, because it's infinite, right? And one can take an infinite number of pathways through it. But God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections will be proven to be true when the predictions come to pass. That's the point. It's to prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which overwhelmingly proves these things. Okay, we can't explain everything in one video, though. Now, so Revelation 8:9 states that, quote, a third of the ships were destroyed. The ships in his prophecy symbolize America. The Hantavirus ship departed end of the world on April 1st, 8 months and 9 days, as in Revelation 8:9 in the ships, before it is predicted that U.S. warships will be sunk on December 10th. This December 10th was known before this insight, this connection, which is why I say it the way I say it, because it's confirmation, which makes it extraordinary. It's stunning, because the date was already known. Then, because it was already known, to have an 8 months and 9 days connection from this very prophetic ship that departed the end of the world. Are you kidding? This is an amazing thing to behold here, this paragraph. 8 months and 9 days is 11 times 23 days. 8 months and 9 days hints at 89. The reciprocal of 89, 1 divided by 89, is 0.01123. All right, and 8 months and 9 days is equal to 11 times 23 days. Well, 1123 is the 188th prime number, which God reuses frequently because H188 in the Hebrew concordance is the word woe exclamation mark. This word is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. The first death on the Hantavirus ship occurred on April 11th. 4 plus 6 days, as in Psalm 46, as in the nation's rage, after the ship departed the end of the world. As in the world nations in Psalm 46. When the ship arrived on May 10th in the Canary Islands, there were 7 times 7 plus 7 plus 7, or 7 times 7 plus 7 times 7 plus 7 times 7 passengers and crew. May 10th is exactly 7 months before the predicted sinking of U.S. warships. In the Bible, the number 70 symbolizes the nations of the world. After departing the end of the world, Argentina, the ship arrived in Spain on May 10th, and this was 70 days before the final game of the World Cup of Nations, as in the end of the world, between Argentina and Spain. So it's something that I already said earlier, which is this thing that 70 in the Bible symbolizes nations. And we have the 70 days connection to the World Cup of Nations, the final one. And then that's also hinting at the end of the world. In this World Cup tournament, Messi of Argentina scored a record-setting 7 plus 7 plus 7th World Cup goal. And then he didn't score any more goals. But he scored his 7 plus 7 plus 7th World Cup goal on the date 7/7 against Egypt. In the Bible, Egypt symbolizes the nations and the world. While wearing jersey number 10, Messi scored his record-setting 19th goal, and number 10 and 19th goal hints at 9/11, in the 80th minute of the game against Jordan. After the Israelites escaped the king of Egypt, they passed through bodies of water, including the Jordan River, from what today is Jordan, into the Promised Land. The Pilgrims saw their journey across the Atlantic Ocean, as in the Hantavirus ship across the Atlantic Ocean, in ships to their Promised Land, as analogous to the Israelites' crossing of the Red Sea and the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Passage through bodies of water in the Middle East hints at the destruction of U.S. warships in the Middle East. And again, the Pilgrims were the spiritual founding of America. And this will be, if you will, in a way, the end of America with the destruction of U.S. warships. It's at least a symbolic and beginning of the end or whatever. In the Bible, the king of Egypt is a type for the anti-Messiah. Spain defeated Messi, as in anti-Messiah, to win their second World Cup in the 23rd World Cup. 2 times 23 equals 46. In Genesis 46, 70 descendants of Jacob, as in Israel, Jacob is another name for Israel, entered Egypt. After the Israelites left Egypt, Moses selected 70 leaders. In the game against Egypt, Messi scored his record-setting 7+7+7th World Cup goal on the date 7/7, on the anniversary of the London bombings, when people from 6+6+6 nations were killed. The king of Egypt in the Bible is a type for the anti-Messiah, and in Bible prophecy, the anti-Messiah's number is 666. The World Cup final between Argentina and Spain, as in the Hantavirus ship, was played in host country USA. The destruction of ships in Isaiah 23 and Revelation 8 symbolize the destruction of America. Messi's goal against Egypt, as in the nations and the world, Egypt symbolizes in the Bible the nations and the world, was his 8th and last goal of the 23rd World Cup of Nations, which hints at Isaiah 23 and Revelation 8. So there's this pattern God is establishing here with this parallel with the Hantavirus ship and the coming destruction of America symbolized through the destruction of ships in Bible prophecy, Revelation 8 and Isaiah 23, which is why in this parallel with the Hantavirus ship and the World Cup, Messi scored his 8th goal against the team that symbolizes the nations in the 23rd World Cup. And again, Messi symbolizes anti-Messiah and on and on. So there's a pattern of 8 and 23 here in context of ships. Messi, scored 8 goals over the 8 games he played in the 23rd World Cup tournament. After departing the end of the world, Argentina, the ship arrived in the Canary Islands, Spain, with people from 23 nations. 88 of the people were passengers. So that's the parallel with this 8 and 23, which points to Isaiah 23 and Revelation 8. There were 88 passengers from 23 different nations when the ship arrived in Spain. The end of the world, World Cup of Nations final. Final game, end of the world. And of course, Spain was in the final, playing Argentina, which is where the ship departed from and then ended up in Spain. After departing the end of the world, Argentina, the ship arrived in the Canary Islands, Spain, with passengers and crew from 23 nations, and there were 8 hantavirus cases, another 8 and 23. Again, 23 nations, World Cup of Nations, right? 8 hantavirus cases, 8 goals for Messi in the 8 games he played. Okay. 6 of the 8 cases were confirmed cases. Messi of Argentina played in his record-setting 6th World Cup of Nations and scored 8 goals over 8 games played. So 6 of the 8 cases were confirmed. Messi was playing in his 6th World Cup and he scored 8 goals. And again, World Cup number 23 and 23 countries from which the passengers were from. I think I have already in this video, because it's now 2 days after I began recording the first half, I think I've already explained how it is that America is in Bible prophecy through Isaiah chapter 23 and Revelation 8. Isaiah 23 being about ancient Tyre, which is symbolic of America, and the ships of Tarshish, which is the UK, and the daughter of Tarshish, which is America. Tyre being symbolic of America because it was protected by ocean. Tarshish, the ships of Tarshish, Great Britain, was protected by ocean and also separated from the rest of Europe to create God's special nation and culture and language, which he used to spread the gospel around the world through its daughter, America. And the ships are how America and Great Britain became the dominant powers in the world, the naval and merchant ships. Okay, so that's why Revelation 8 and Isaiah 23 are about America. Contrary to what some will say, America isn't in Bible prophecy. The destruction of a third of the ships, which is what I'm getting to here, is symbolic of the destruction of America. So again, now you can see clearly we have this pattern here of 8 and 23, as I explained, in the World Cup and the hantavirus ship. Okay, that's important. We have a ship. This sign is about a ship. And again, we had the 8 confirmed, we had the 8 cases and people from 23 nations, 23rd World Cup of Nations, 8 goals for Messi, anti-Messiah, his 8th one being against Egypt, which symbolizes the nations. Okay, you get the idea here. This is an amazing thing to behold, what I am explaining. Now, Revelation 8:9, quote, a third of the ships were destroyed, unquote. The ship, the Hantavirus ship, arrived with people from 23 nations. There were 8 cases and 3 people died from the Hantavirus. 23rd World Cup of Nations, in which Messi scored 8 goals, was hosted by 3 nations. 3 deaths and 3 host nations hints at 33 and 33%, which is a third, which hints at a third of the ships were destroyed. Messi's 8th and final goal of the 23rd World Cup, as in Revelation 8 and Isaiah 23, was against Egypt in the 83rd minute of the game. 83 is the 23rd prime number. Messi's 8th goal was in the 23rd prime number minute of the game. Another Isaiah 23 and Revelation 8 hint. Messi, as in anti-Messiah, his goal in the 83rd minute of the game against Egypt, and again, the king of Egypt is a type for the anti-Messiah, in the 23rd World Cup of Nations, hints at 8 cases and 3 deaths, which hints at 83rd minute, right? The 8 cases and 3 deaths when it arrived at its destination in Spain hints at the 83rd minute. Okay, and anyway, the 8 cases and 3 deaths among people from 23 nations is what is hinted at with what I was saying earlier. Messi's 8th goal, the 23rd prime number minute. Okay. And the World Cup was hosted by 3 nations. Messi was born 80 days before the date 9/11 in the year 87, which was 7 plus 7 years before World Cup Trade Center 7 collapsed. Messi lost to Spain. 7 plus 7 Spaniards were evacuated to Madrid, Spain, after disembarking the ship in Spain, Canary Islands. While wearing number 10, Messi scored his record-setting 19th World Cup goal in the 18th, which is a 9/11, because he was wearing number 10 and the 19th goal, right? And this goal was in the 80th minute of the game, and Messi was born 80 days before the date 9/11. The ship that departed the end of the world, Argentina, arrived in Spain on May 10th, exactly 80 years, as in the 80th minute of the game, as in Messi's birth 80 days before the date 9/11. The end of the world Argentina ship arrived in Spain on May 10th, exactly 80 years after Boston, which symbolizes America, the spiritual founding of America with the Pilgrims, Red Sox win streak came to an end in the year 46. The second win for Spain in the 23rd World Cup hints at 2 times 23 equals 46. So why is God pointing to the 46 Red Sox? Because well, it's not actually explained right here in this video or this paragraph, but there's another video about it. Because the Red Sox this year, during the World Cup, during the final of the World Cup, were on a 15-game win streak, which tied the record back with the 46 Red Sox, the franchise record. So there was, in other words, another way in which God pointed to the 46 Red Sox. But this is one way right here, through the ship arriving on May 10th, exactly 80 years. And God pointed to Trump's 80th birthday and all that because the 2 goals scored in the USA's first loss of the tournament were scored by number 6 and 14, and Trump was born on the date 6/14, and on, like I explained elsewhere. Anyway, the 46 Red Sox lost the 46 World Series. That's why God is pointing to the 46 Red Sox, ultimately because of the 46 World Series, which hints at the World Cup, the second win by Spain in the 23rd World Cup, which hints at 46. In other words, 46 World Series. Okay, and in this 46 World Series, the Red Sox lost in the famous 8th inning of Game 7, the final game, as in the World Cup final, World Series final Game 7, the famous 8th inning. And what I'm getting at here is, this is why Lionel Messi was 80 days before 87, because 80 years before this World Cup is the famous 8th inning and Game 7, okay? And this was when the player named Enos Slaughter made his quote-unquote mad dash to home plate. May 10th, 46, when the Red Sox win streak came to an end, is exactly 80 years and 7 months, as in the 8th inning in Game 7, as in Messi born in 87, 80 days plus 7 years before 9/11 in the World Trade Center number 7, the 3rd building. Okay, so the win streak for the 846 Red Sox came to an end 80 years and 7 months because 8th inning, Game 7, before the predicted slaughter, as in Enos Slaughter, and the destruction of 3, as in the 3rd building on 9/11, U.S. warships on December 10th, 2026. The score was tied when Enos Slaughter made his mad dash 3-3. Not only that, the series was tied 3-3 when he scored the winning run to win the game 4-3 and the series 4-3. But the score was tied 3-3 when he made his mad dash, which is why he made the mad dash. And this hints at 33%, or a third of the ships were destroyed. And we're predicting 3 U.S. warships. Two of which will be aircraft carriers, just like there were the 2 World Trade Center towers. Then there will be a smaller ship as a third ship, just like the third building on 9/11, building number 7. These Hantavirus ship and World Cup of Nations signs point to the Israelites' escape departure from Egypt, which again symbolizes the nations and the world in the Bible, and arrival into the Promised Land. Again, the Hantavirus ship and World Cup of Nations signs point to the Israelites' escape or departure from Egypt and their arrival into the Promised Land, which is, by the way, what Boston symbolizes, because the Pilgrims saw their journey across the Atlantic and escape from the King of England and into their Promised Land, as analogous from the Israelites' escape from the King of Egypt and their crossing the Jordan River into the Promised Land. So anyway, these signs point to Psalm chapter 2, which begins with, "Why do the nations rage, and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us." This is actually referring to the desire for the world to get rid of the nation of Israel. Let us burst their bonds apart. Let's scatter the people of Israel out of the nation of Israel. The signs point to Psalm 46, verse 6. The nations rage. Just like Psalm chapter 2, the nations rage. Psalm 46, the nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. The second win for Spain, an anagram for Psalm, in the 23rd World Cup, pointed to 2 times 23 equals 46 equals Psalm 46, verse 6. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. Messiah, as in anti-Messiah, 666, played a record-setting 6th World Cup of Nations, which is why we get Psalm 46, verse 6. And there were 6 confirmed cases of hantavirus when the ship arrived in Spain, and Messi lost the final to Spain, which won its 2nd World Cup in the 23rd World Cup. That's 46. And there were 6 hantavirus cases when they got to Spain. You get the idea. And again, there was 20 people from 23 nations, like I explained, 23rd World Cup. After 2 people departed the ship in St. Helena, the ship continued its journey to Spain with people from 23 nations. Well, I don't know if that's accurate. I think there were more than 2 people that departed the ship. But what I think is the case is that 2 people died after departing the ship that had people from 23 nations. It was either 2 people died on the ship with people from 23 nations, or 2 people departed the ship on which there were people from 23 nations. And anyway, and that gives us a 46, 2 times 23. And then there were 6 confirmed cases, which gives us Psalm 2 times 23, verse 6. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The world of nations will rage at Israel when it is predicted that Israel will have no choice but to nuke Tehran on the 3rd day of the year 9 plus 9 plus 9, which flipped upside down is 666. In the World Cup of Nations that was hosted by 3 nations, as in the 3rd day of the year, Messiah, as in anti-Messiah, scored a goal in a record 9 straight World Cup games. And then his streak ended. And God uses records for signs. So this World Cup that God used heavily with Messi as an anti-Messiah, as in 666, okay? And that's what 9 plus 9 plus 9 gives us, the year, right? And also what I didn't mention here is that the game, I do believe, the one on which he scored his 9th goal, 9 games in a row with a goal, I think that was in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state, Florida. I think that was the game that was in Florida. Doesn't really matter. I've already established it anyway, because 9 is enough. The 9th straight game in this World Cup was the record, and the tournament was hosted by 3 nations. And we're talking about the nations raging at Israel on the 3rd day of the year 9 plus 9 plus 9, when it will have no choice but to nuke Tehran. Because for those that do not have a spiritual perspective, the conflict, the world, reality itself cannot be properly understood without a spiritual perspective, as in a biblical spiritual perspective. And it is obvious to someone with a biblical perspective, but also someone who understands Bible prophecy, that Satan is literally the force behind Iran and the regime. It's Satan. It's the devil. God has set all of this up for this grand climax of history right here, including the Hormuz Strait and everything. Anyway, this regime, it will not stop at all, ever, at attempting to get a nuclear bomb to destroy Israel. I mean, that's its main goal. Not only is it the regime's main goal on the surface, I mean, we can know this without understanding that Satan is behind the regime, but the regime is not rational from a surface perspective, from a secular perspective. It's not rational, and their religion has it that they must destroy Israel. Or if you know more details, actually, they believe that their function in world history at the end is to create chaos. And it doesn't matter if they sacrifice themselves in the process. In fact, it's actually part of their religion, their specific sect of Islam, that is ideal, that they end up being martyrs in order to create chaos and bring about the Mahdi, the end of the world, and on and on. If you don't know that, that's actually a fact, right? I'm not making that up. That's what they believe. And anyway, so that alone is enough to understand. You don't need to have a biblical, a deep understanding like I do, and this video is explaining, to know that Iran will not stop until it has a nuclear bomb. So God has set that up deliberately so that Israel will nuke Tehran at the end, so that the nations rage against Israel. This World Cup, including the final game in New York, pointed to the collapse of the World Trade Center on 9/11. The Israelites departed Egypt, as in the world or nations, and arrived into the Promised Land. The Hantavirus ship departed the end of the world on April 1st, 9 months and 1 plus 1 days before Israel will nuke Iran on January 3rd next year. 9 months and 1 plus 1 days, that's a 9/11. The World Trade Center, nations of the world raging, the World Cup final in New York. The Israelites departed Egypt. The ship departed the end of the world location. The Hantavirus ship arrived in Canary. So the ship departed. The Israelites departed and arrived, right? They departed Egypt and arrived in the Promised Land. The Hantavirus ship departed the end of the world and arrived in Canary Islands, Spain on May 10th, exactly 2 times 17 weeks before Israel will nuke Iran. This is also profound. The flood judgment began on the date 2/17, when Noah and his family were saved in a ship. This is recorded in the Bible, the date, 17th day of the second month. That's why 2 times 17 weeks exactly, from when the ship arrived in Spain after departing the end of the world. The 2 planes on 9/11 crashed into the 2 towers 17 minutes apart. And that was on 9/11, which makes this a confirmation for the 9 months and 1 + 1 days also from when the ship departed. And so in other words, from when the ship departed and from when the date it arrived, we have these extremely profound, most profound connections to the day that the nations will rage against Israel, as the prophecy even says. This is about God's plan and Israel, and coming together to burst their bonds apart, to come against the Lord and his anointed, because his anointed is coming to rule from Jerusalem for the 1,000 years of peace, and that is what Satan is attempting to prevent with his anti-plan and anti-Messiah and Iran and the nuke and everything to get rid of the Jews. That's why the irrational hatred of Jews in our day and throughout history. It is spiritually rebellion against God. And God set it up. Israel is like a watershed issue, if you will. That is symbolic of where people are destined for their eternities, whether it's hell and then the second death, because no one gets tortured forever, contrary to what evangelicals will say, because of course that's not true, and the Bible doesn't say that, or to live eternity with God and Christ. So, one of the big stories of the World Cup was the surprise performance of Cape Verde. Messi, as an anti-Messiah, and Argentina eliminated Cape Verde with a 3-2 score in the final 32 round before playing Spain in the 23rd World Cup final. Obama is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. Obama wore number 23. The basketball president wore number 23 in high school basketball. The Hantavirus ship departed the end of the world Argentina and arrived in the former Portuguese colony of Cape Verde before arriving in Spain. Okay, so that's why there was this surprise performance, and one of the big stories of the World Cup was Cape Verde, which was eliminated by the prophetic Argentina and Messi, because the ship departed Argentina at the end of the world and arrived in the Portuguese colony Cape Verde before it arrived in Spain. The ship was in Cape Verde briefly for 3 days, and no one disembarked. There were 3 deaths from the Hantavirus ship. There were 3 deaths from the Hantavirus on the ship. Argentina played Cape Verde on the 3rd of the month, the 3rd day of the month, in the tournament hosted by 3 nations. 3 U.S. warships are predicted to sink. Quote, a third of the ships, unquote. Israel is predicted to nuke Iran on the 3rd day of the year 9 + 9 + 9. Argentina beat Cape Verde with a 3rd goal in the 111th minute in a game played in the 9 + 9 + 9th state. Okay, so I knew there was a game that was played in the 9 + 9 + 9th state. That was the one against Cape Verde. And the goal, the winning goal, because it was a close game, and so that was a big part of the story, was how Cape Verde almost eliminated Argentina, because they were tied they kept coming back and tying Argentina. But then finally, in the 111th minute, which hints at a 3, 1 + 1 + 1, the third goal of the game for Argentina was scored on this third day of the month in the tournament hosted by 3 nations. The Hantavirus ship had 3 deaths, and it was in Cape Verde for 3 days. And it was just briefly in Cape Verde, and that's also prophetic, because the eclipse will just briefly touch the very top sliver north corner of Portugal before it crosses over into Spain. Or during the eclipse, anyway. So it's another parallel with the eclipse, in other words, because the eclipse will just briefly barely touch Portugal. One little corner of it. Just like the ship barely touched Cape Verde, because no one disembarked. All they did was anchor off the coast of Cape Verde for only 3 days, while the leader of Cape Verde said that they couldn't disembark. And so then they went on to Spain. Okay, and we're predicting 3 U.S. warships to be sunk. And also, again, the prophecy is about a third of the ships, so 3. There's a lot of 3s here. And again, it's the third goal of the game that won the game in the 111th minute in the 9 + 9 + 9th state, and that hints at 9/11. The sinking of the ships will be a second 9/11. Again, 9/11 was about the World Trade Centers collapsing. This was the World Cup of Nations. Judgment on the world. And the number 9 is the most important number in God's prophetic signs. As from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. And God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. But to confirm, as a second witness to the relevance of this game in the 9 + 9 + 9th state, God had the winning goal in the 111th minute. Verde is Portuguese for green. The upcoming eclipse on August 12th will pass over 3 nations. The eclipse will pass over Greenland before briefly touching the very top sliver of Portugal. And again, the ship briefly touched the former Portuguese colony of Cape Verde. I forgot to mention that earlier. Yeah, Cape Verde is associated with Portugal because it's a former Portuguese colony. They speak Portuguese, etc. Okay, and then the eclipse will traverse over Spain and exit Spain's coast, where the 9/11 ringleader made final preparations before the attack. The Egyptian. And the next game in the World Cup tournament for Argentina was against Egypt. Yeah, and again, it was the round of 32, and the final score was 3-2, and Obama's number is 32. His number is also 44, and the next round with Egypt was the round 4 × 4. Well, anyway, here again, we have this parallel between 9/11, the eclipse, and the Hantavirus ship. Okay, Cape Verde is green. Verde means green. The eclipse will first pass over Greenland before then it will touch briefly the tip of Portugal, and Cape Verde is a Portuguese colony. Greenland, Portugal, and Spain make 3 nations. The cup was hosted by 3 nations. There were 3 deaths from the Hantavirus. And we're talking about a second 9/11 in which it is predicted 3 U.S. warships will be sunk. And there were 3 buildings that collapsed on 9/11. Messi scored his 9 + 11th World Cup goal against Cape Verde. Another confirmation of this 9/11 up here with the game in Cape Verde is that Messi scored his record-setting 9 + 11th goal in that game. And it was on the date 7/3, which hints at 3 sets of 7, which comes from the Bible and regards walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. And Messi scored 3 × 7 goals in the World Cup. At the end of the World Cup, he had a total of 7 times 3 in total for his World Cup totals, for all of the World Cups he's played in. Messi lost to Spain when player number 7 scored in the final of the World Cup, hosted by 3 nations. The final in New York, where the final was played in New York, where the towers collapsed on 9/11, including 3 buildings. 9 plus 11th goal on the date 7/3, because it's about collapse, which is what happened on 9/11. 3 sets of 7 is about the collapse of security, which is what 9/11 was. It was a demonstration by God of the temporary removal of its walls of security. Messi hints at the anti-Messiah, 44th president, who was inaugurated in 2009 and read Psalm 46 at the 9/11 memorial on the day that Messi's son was born. The Argentina versus Cape Verde game pointed to the virus ship. The anti-Messiah will enforce the VACCINE mark of the Antichrist during a virus pandemic. This was actually written, it was just realized finally. I had thought this before, a long time before, but now it's been confirmed 100%. So it's not just going to be a virus pandemic that's coming up. It will be a continuation of COVID-19. There's not going to be a new virus. What is going to happen is that the virus is currently being forced into a state where it will have no choice but to mutate into something completely different, but still COVID-19, but something that will evade the immunities that are suboptimal of those who have taken the VACCINE. Because the VACCINE has triggered all of this in the first place, this forced evolution of the virus to become something what it's going to become, because there wasn't normal herd immunity. We had this vaccination program into the pandemic, which is something you just don't do, and people took the virus, the vaccine thing at different points in time, and all sorts of things which didn't trap the virus. And then you had some people with natural immunity and didn't take the vaccine, but the ones that did take it have engendered this, because of the suboptimal immunity that's provided by that, as opposed to natural immunity, has forced this virus to evolve. It's going to force this virus to evolve into something that will not be able to be countered by their immune systems when it takes on this new mutation that's coming. And so there will be a true pandemic, because this past pandemic was a big lie. But there will be a disaster. There's a coming disaster from the COVID-19. And it is because of the evil that was this thing that is an abomination and is the mark of the Antichrist, this VACCINE. And so that's why, if you have noticed, there's a lot of 19s going on in this World Cup, including the final played on the 19th day of the month. But we had, like I explained before, Lionel Messi, when he was 19 years old, bathing the other player who is now 19 and wears number 19. He played for Spain, and on and on. It's all about God pointing to the upcoming mutation of the CVD-19. All right, now back to what I was saying. What was I saying here now? So the Messiah hints at anti-Messiah, the 44th president, who was inaugurated in 2009, and read Psalm 46 at the 9/11 memorial. Okay, and Messi's son was born on the date 9/11 as well. That's a typo. He wasn't born on the same day that Obama read Psalm 46 at the 9/11 memorial. But this is a big thing here. This is why, the 9/11 connections with Psalm 46 and this World Cup, is because the Antichrist read Psalm 46 at the 9/11 memorial. The Argentina versus Cape Verde game pointed to the virus ship. The anti-Messiah will enforce the mark of the anti-Messiah during a virus pandemic. The VACCINE changes a person's 2 times 23 chromosomes. Messi, as an anti-Messiah, second World Cup of Nations final in a row in the 23rd World Cup. Okay, 2 times 23 equals 46. Messi. The Argentina versus Cape Verde game was played in the 9+9+9th state, 4 times 4 days, as in the 44th president in 09, before the World Cup of Nations final that pointed to 9/11, which hints at Revelation 9/11 and King Apollyon and the coming mass demonic possession of those who take the mark of the anti-Messiah. Because this is the verse that symbolizes this description in Bible prophecy of the coming demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. The winning goal in the Argentina versus Cape Verde game was scored by a player number 13 in the 111th minute. 111 is the 36th semi-prime number, and 36 hints at 666. It is 3 sixes, or hints at 3 sixes, but it is 6 times 6, and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way to 36 equals 666. The mark of the anti-Messiah is described in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, which is why in the 111th minute, number 13 scored the winning goal. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.